I am so excited to be here with you tonight. This is a topic that I am truly passionate about, and I'll help you understand how I got to this conversation. So, what we're really going to be talking about is the idea of personal branding and reputation management. And candidly, I think I have one of the best jobs in the world because I get to work on a daily basis with executives and business leaders, entrepreneurs, even military veterans around the world, helping them take control of how they're perceived. It's interesting when I think about how perception really works because a lot of people come to me saying they want a reason to get out of bed in the morning, that their career, their work, their relationships isn't inspiring anymore, or they feel like they're not getting paid what they think they're worth, the value they're bringing to the company or the community or the conversation isn't being recognized in terms of financial recognition, or they really just want to make a difference to others. And maybe that's lacking in the kind of work that they do or the career that they've chosen. So I think I would ask you to think about which of these three areas is the most meaningful to you. Is it you're finding yourself getting out of bed in the morning and going to work, or maybe you're even readying for a transition and not really sure that you're inspired? Are you undervalued and underpaid and underrecognized? Or do you feel like you're not able to see the difference that you're making in the lives of other people? Well, I would say if all three or even one of these is on the top of your mind, you're in the right place because that's what personal branding does. It gives you that sense of purpose and intention and focus for your career path, for your relationships, for the kind of work that you do. You find yourself being paid and compensated for the contribution that you actually are making because your value isn't just clear to you, but it's clear to the people around you. And my favorite is that you're able to see and measure and touch the difference and impact you're making in those people you want to serve, which I know is a big part of your life because of your military history. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about myself. I came to work with all of you in 2009. And to explain what happened in 2009, I'll back up a year. In 2008, when the market was falling apart and companies were laying off, and anyone who was in the civilian sector was either losing their job or about to lose their job, I became an entrepreneur. Looking back, it may not have been the smartest thing that I was thinking about taking such a big risk when everything around me was unstable. But I had spent 20 years in corporate helping to stand up and build up and promote some of the biggest brands and initiatives, global initiatives and global brands. And I wanted to do something different. So in 2008, I decided instead of working for companies, I would now work for individuals. So I started building this thing called personal branding, which, trust me, back in 2008, nobody knew what it was. Today, at least three people know what it is. But I was building this company, and because my business was about helping individuals create value proposition, get edge and competitive advantage, and be able to market themselves intentionally to people who needed to see them as valuable, and because of where the market was, my business took off. And I was so excited. A year and a half later, 2009, November, actually, I got invited to a Denver Broncos football game. Now, I am a diehard Denver Broncos football fan, which was not easy this last year. But I was at the football game and I didn't realize it happened to be the week of Veterans Day. And the team did something at halftime that changed my life. You see, they brought some Fort Carson soldiers onto the field to talk about what it was like to transition from the military into the civilian sector. And normally I don't pay attention to what happens at halftime in a football game, but I did. And they talked about things like, I don't know how to tell people what I did before that would help them see me as valuable for my civilian career. Or I don't know how to explain my background to someone who's not from the military. Or I don't know how to sell myself. And in that moment, I realized that what I was doing for executives and entrepreneurs and business leaders was perhaps not being talked about for those of you that were coming out of uniform. And I said, I'm going to commit to helping. I thought it would be easier than it actually was because I spent about 6 months knocking on doors, trying to offer services, programs, anything. I didn't want to be paid. I just wanted to give back and say thank you. And a lot of doors were closed in my face because there are civilians that take advantage of the prior military community, and I get that. But the first door that actually opened for me was General Peter Pace, a wonderful, wonderful military leader and human being. He ran a program in Philadelphia, taking service disabled veterans and teaching them and transitioning them into Wall Street jobs. And he let me come out and teach a personal branding class. And not only did the class love what I was talking about, but I became hooked and I saw the opportunity and the need to take this message even further. Now, in the years since then, I've done a lot of work in this space. So it has been, wow, what, 10, 11 years that I have been working with all of you and your counterparts and colleagues, that I have been working to help build out what it means to take a personal brand into a transition experience. In 2015, I wrote the book, Your Next Mission, which many of you may have heard of. It has gone viral within military communities. And that book really became a way for me to have a conversation with LinkedIn in 2015, who was starting to build their concentration on bringing veterans into the LinkedIn platform. So I helped LinkedIn build the veteran portal and created some wonderful content for LinkedIn Learning, which I'll tell you about a little bit later. I've written a companion book about hiring military talent because while you might have questions and concerns and challenges, so do employers. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. I've done a TED Talk on this, and I know Meg shared the link to that. So if you got an extra 12 minutes, I'd love to have you watch that. And I'm really excited about a new book that I have coming out. Actually, it came out in October, Success After Service. And this book is very different. It's really a roadmap for somebody who's going from a military culture and community and language and work style into the civilian. And your very own Elite Meet member, advocate, Chris Sanchez, is featured in the book and has just been a huge asset to me as I've unpacked some of the stories. And so many people contributed stories to this book. The book really doesn't just only look at employment, because many of you, when you were exiting the military or about to, look at education as a viable career path. Maybe it's advanced education or completing education, as well as entrepreneurship. So the book talks about how do you get funding? How do you approach investors? How do you pick a job? And how do you accept a job? So I'm really, really proud of this book and everyone who contributed, including Elite Meet's very own Chris Sanchez. But we're talking about some things that I've learned, and some of it comes from what I've learned from you. I have worked probably upwards of tens of thousands of transitioning service members, veterans who've been in the marketplace for a long time, as well as military spouses. And there's several things that I see as common patterns. First, we talk differently about ourselves, you and I. As a civilian, I have no trouble telling you about me, about my accomplishments. I can read you my resume frontwards and backwards and probably do it without taking another breath. But that's different. That's difficult for you because the military teaches those values of service before self, of not about, it's not about you, it's about those you serve alongside. And that's a wonderful value set, right? You're supposed to take responsibility and accountability, but never recognition and praise for what you do in the military. And that's wonderful. But the challenge is when you transition out of the military and into a civilian environment, you're going to be sitting alongside and perhaps interviewing with civilians who don't understand that. And if we just think about the numbers for a second, and I'm going to refer to this a lot because it's really important. The new number is saying that it's 5% of the American population. It was 1 to 2%. Now it's hovering closer to 5% of the American population has served in uniform. That means 95 to 98% of the American population has not, which means there are people like me who didn't know what questions I could ask, didn't know what a follow-up question was. So when you're not speaking about yourself in first person, and let's say you're sitting with a hiring manager who's asking you to sell me on you, And you're saying, well, when I was in uniform, or my squad or my platoon or my company, this is what we did. They don't understand why you're not taking credit for it. I mean, it sounds amazing. Why wouldn't you take credit? And so there's all these misunderstandings and implicit biases that come up. And that's where things get really confusing. But fundamentally, we just talk about each other, ourselves differently. And I want to reassure you, I'm not going to teach you how to brag in this program, but I am going to teach you how to be a little bit more clear about bringing that I message forward, because it is important in the civilian space. Command and control, leadership style. We lead differently. And one of the biggest reluctances on the hiring managers and employers side, that I've worked with at least, is they're afraid of command and control leadership, right? That's not typically a civilian company experience. Are you going to walk around with giving orders using knife hands, barking orders? Or are you going to wait and be told what to do? The civilian space is experiential. We care about things like culture and relationships and inclusivity and diversity and how everybody feels about the company's progress. So certain leadership styles throw hiring managers off in the uniform. Um, One of the parts of my TED Talk that gets the most comments is when I talk about uniform. I don't wear a uniform in my job. I've never worn a uniform. You did. And when you wear a military uniform, everything you've ever done is displayed on your chest and your shoulders. When somebody walks into the room in uniform, you immediately know where you rank, right? What's the hierarchy look like? Where do I fall in the pecking order, right? You can tell everything by what somebody's wearing, but you can't tell that with me. I have clients in the Silicon Valley area, which is Northern California, where all the tech companies are. And some of them are running multi-billion-dollar tech companies. And if you saw them on the street, you would think they were homeless people. They wear, a torn t-shirt, dirty jeans, and flip-flops. That's their look, right? So there's no uniform that says this person is a high-ranking person in this company. And that shouldn't be understated, because for many of the people I've coached and mentored out of the military, that's been a stumbling block that they really didn't anticipate, is how does self-identity show up in what you wear? And finally, there's this concept of choice. And to a civilian, choice is everything. We want choice over anything we can possibly have the ability to choose. I want to choose the clients I work with. I want to choose the places that I speak. I want to choose the way my income comes in. I want to choose how I spend my days and what I wear and what I look like. But choice, when you're not used to it, can be really hard to get your head around. So I say these truths because they are consistent. And every time I typically share this in a workshop or a presentation, there are people in the room going, I thought I was the only one. I really thought I was the only one. So if you're thinking that, you're not the only one. Everyone who has sat in your seat has had these same issues or concerns or ideas. But as I mentioned before, many of you are either in employment or are pursuing employment. Some of you may be looking at education. We know that's very common, not only with our elite military, but across the board, is additional education. Sometimes it's a stopgap, right? You don't know what you want to do, so additional education. And many of you are going to be looking at entrepreneurship. What does it mean to start your own business? And there's a few things we need to keep in mind. The resume is still a part of the conversation. I'm not a fan of resumes. Resumes look backwards. A resume is a list of your experience. And if you're recently separated or retired, it doesn't say what you can do. It just says what you did and what you did in the military. So it is a necessary evil, regardless of which path, but it isn't where everything hinges. Relationships are huge. Networking, which you've heard that term a lot, networking is critical, whether you're looking for a job, looking for a promotion, looking to change to your competitor, education, or entrepreneurship. Who you know and how they feel about you is pivotal. That management style, right? It's very important to understand, where do you thrive? When you were doing the much more important work that you were doing while you were in the military,
what leadership styles did you relate to? What leadership style did you display that led you to success and led you to feeling good about that? It's important to know it on both ends. But companies hire for culture and fit. They need you to have a certain set of minimum required skills and experience and certifications, but they look for people who are going to fit into their organization, who are like them. It's an easy one once you figure that out, but to the company, culture is king. We can train somebody on skills, but if they're not like us, if they're not going to get our jokes and value the same mission that we value, it's too hard to upskill that. And the companies out there are struggling and they're challenged in hiring you. I work with companies like Google and Disney and GE Healthcare and all these wonderful big organizations and even smaller companies. And whether they have robust veteran hiring initiatives and DoD skill bridge internships and all of that, there's still a lot of disconnect. And I think it comes down to that 95% are civilian and 5% are prior military. So there's going to be some gaps. And it's not about fixing you and it's not about fixing them. It's about helping build awareness and bridge that divide so both sides win. You find employment, career path, whatever you're looking for that makes you happy and creates that sense of meaning that you're looking for. And the company benefits by having the amazing talent and character traits that somebody who's served in our military, and especially in the special operations side of the world, can bring into that. So these are some realities that I like to frame this up with. But I'm using this term brand. What does brand mean? If I asked an audience of 30 people what brand means, what I would typically hear is brand is a logo. It's a swoosh, it's a jingle, it's a color palette, it's a font or a type style. Well, I can tell you that those things are parts of brand, but brand is a feeling. Brand is an emotion. When I did corporate branding for 20 years, the first thing we would always ask whenever we had a new product launch or a service line that we were initiating or office we were building, what do we want people to feel when they see our name or they hear our name or they come in contact with our product? Brands are feelings. It's an experience. It's a promise that if you buy this car or try this lipstick or read this newspaper, that you're going to feel something. And that feeling is why people buy. They act on logic, right? I need a car, but we buy on emotion. And if you're not sure about that, think for just a moment about the last thing you overpaid for. Exactly. Right. When we have a choice between generic and name brand, if we have a connection emotionally to that name brand, we might pay more for it because there's a different perception of value, and that value comes from emotion. So I told you I made the shift from corporate to personal. And one thing I realized is personal branding is actually really simple. Whether you're coming from the military into the private sector, or you're changing jobs, or you just want to be more relevant, it's really a simple process, but it's not easy because even in our short time together, I'm going to share some things and ask you to think about some things that will make you uncomfortable. I admit up front, it will make you uncomfortable, but they're important because in order to confidently and clearly communicate who you are and what you stand for and what you believe and why you're worth what you're worth, you have to know all that. You have to come to the table with all of that figured out. It's not feasible to expect anybody else can figure that out for you. Personal branding is also about perception and judgment. And I'm fully aware that as soon as I put those words on the screen, people have a reaction, right? I remember when I was raising my two sons, I taught them, it doesn't matter what other people think about you. It just matters what's in your heart. I was half right because it does matter what's in your heart. You have to believe you're valued and loved and valuable. But what other people perceive and what other people think about us also matters. Because if I'm in a hiring decision and I've got two candidates and one person makes me feel like I want to take a chance on him, and the other person makes me feel like I don't really know what he cares about, that perception is going to drive a buying decision. Similarly, if I have a negative feeling about you, I might not want to bring you into critical conversations. I might not want to advance you in the company just because I feel a certain way. So, perception and judgment really do matter. But this is a program about control, and personal branding is where you get control. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to show you how to have more control over the future than you ever thought possible. Wherever you're starting from, whether you've been out of the military for 10 years and you're thriving in your career, this will show you how to have more. Whether you're not being paid what you think you're worth, this will show you how. Or whether you just want to know that you're making a difference, this will show you how. So stick with me for just a moment. So, in order to lay the foundation for personal brand, there's a formula I have to share with you. And it's a very simple formula, but it's not easy. And it's the formula to be able to be credible. And credibility for a brand means that your name, your promise, your experience is trusted. And there is literally only one way to build credibility, and it starts with your values. Now, it's a simple question if I ask you, what are your values? But what I've learned in all the years I've been working with prior military is that if I asked you about your values, I would hear things like honor, integrity, duty, service, commitment, military values, right? And there's a long list. But I'm asking you now, what are your values as an individual, as a man, as a woman, as a person? What are your values? And your values probably line up closely with military values, whichever branch you came through, because that's where you aligned, and that's why you were attracted, and that's what led you there, right? Because we know you raised your hand to serve in the military, nobody forced you. So your values probably anchored closely with those military values, but they may not be the same word or defined the same way. And that's okay, because now we're talking about you and your personal brand. So once you understand what your values are, and another way to think about values is kind of like your moral operating system, right? Your moral code, what you call upon to say that feels good, that feels bad, that's a yes, that's a no. This one I'm going to pursue, this one I stop. That's where our values are. And the other part about values that gets tricky is sometimes your parents' values, your community's values, your cultural values, even your social media influencers' values can come into play. And we need to push those all off to the side and focus on your values, the ones that you personally anchor into. Because here's how the formula works: your values have to match your action in order to be credible. If you tell me you believe in something and there's no evidence, there's no proof, I don't see it in how you behave, I don't give you credibility. And that's where it gets tricky. So when I first started working with the military, my values were perfectly clear. And that's why when I saw this opportunity to say thank you for your service and give of my time and expertise, it was completely obvious to me. But I had zero credibility because I hadn't done anything. So that's why all those doors were shutting in my face. But as I started working with General Pace's program and closing my business down twice a year so I could go to Philadelphia for a week at a time and train those service disabled veterans, and I started speaking at national conferences and often paying my own way to go. I was coaching and mentoring anyone who called me and said they needed help. I started writing for military.com and publishing my own books so I could get the information out there. Then the action matched the value and the credibility went up. But it isn't just enough to do the work, because people might still misunderstand or misinterpret. So every time I stand in front of a military audience, anytime I'm on television or on stage or coaching or mentoring, I make sure that I tie it to the value. And the value is gratitude. Gratitude for your service and commitment and sacrifice to ensure my freedom. That's why I'm here. The action matches that, the credibility rises. There is literally no other way to do it. You can't just assume people are going to know why you're doing what you're doing if your values are leading it. And I know this sounds a little bit awkward because I am asking you to start telling people why you're doing these amazing things you're doing, why you care so much, why you're pouring so much passion into your service, whether you're still active duty or you're separated and retired. But they won't understand unless you do, and they won't give you credibility unless you do. But let's move on. That's the foundation. The next step is to recognize that everybody has a personal brand. You already have one. Think about your current reputation as what makes you unique. So when I hear your name, what do I think about? Do I know what you're passionate about? Do I know what you care about? Who you're passionate about serving? Do I know you? Are you somebody I think of when an opportunity comes up? Your current brand is baseline. So I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about how to get feedback, but feedback can really help here because oftentimes I've found we're not the best judge of what our current brand is. I might think I'm wonderful, but if you ask 20 people, they might use different words. So there are definitely ways you can get feedback and assess your current reputation. Maybe you have formal performance reviews at your company. Maybe you listen to word around the water cooler, right? When what are people saying when you're not in the room? When somebody introduces you, how do they introduce you? Are they using the words you want them to use, or is it all over the place? Your current brand is just the baseline, so we know where we're starting. That's the intent here. And it's a really important step because now we're going to build on that. So I told you this is a program about control, and this is where you get control. Your values and action form your credibility. Your current brand is your baseline, where you're starting from, how your reputation looks today. But this is what you want. How do you want your reputation to look? How would you like to be remembered when you're no longer here? If we fast forward really far into the future and imagine the day that we're saying goodbye to you, what do you want us to remember about you? Are we remembering the P&L you managed or the stock price you helped accelerate? Or are we remembering that you were always there when we had a question, that you mentored and cared for the people around you, that you were a good father, a good mother, a good friend, a good boss? What do you want to be remembered for? This assembly line that we're all on, figuratively speaking, isn't slowing down, and the end is inevitable. But we have so much opportunity between where we are right now and where we end up to affect that legacy. And what's really cool about legacy is we get to start enjoying it today. Now, sometimes it takes a little more work to get there, right? Maybe your current brand and your desired brand, which is what this is, are far apart. Maybe you're not known very favorably today, but you really want to be remembered as something more positive. Then you've got some work to do. And by the same token, if you're really, really well respected and known exactly how you want today, and you want to end that way too, well, you've got some work to do too, because you want to make sure that nothing you do is going to change that, at least not for the negative. But this is where you get control because this is where you focus on the outcome, right? You use terms like end state or ideal state. This is where you envision that. And if you're clear, if you're really clear about what the end looks like, then you turn the lens back and you start being that way today. You make decisions that way. You show up that way. You interact with people and you're selective about the people and the way you position yourself and how you're having conversation today to move in that direction. And I know this sounds easier said than done. It is actually remarkably easy when you've done the hard work. What we're going to talk about in a moment is the marketing, how you put all this to action with things like social media and networking. That part becomes easy if you know what you're working towards. It will become more obvious which conversations you need to be part of, where your career path should go, when you're ready to take that leap of faith and do something that might push you out of your comfort zone. All those things become obvious when you have a strategy and a plan for what you want your legacy to look like. So I know it's a lot to unpack in a quick amount of time, but I would encourage you to spend time thinking about this question. You will be amazed at how much more control you have over the decisions that you will make from today until that day, which is very far off. But we've talked about you up to this point, right? Because it's your personal brand. Well, there's another half of the equation, and the other half is them. And them is your target audience. So, who does your brand need to be compelling and relevant and important and interesting and memorable to? Who are the people or the companies that need to find you interesting? That's your target audience. If you're in a job search, your target audience is a hiring manager at your desired company. If you're an entrepreneur, it might be your dream investor, it might be your business associates, your staff. If you're a student, it could be your professors and other student veterans who are learning alongside of you. But and you can have multiple target audiences to a point. You're not going to have 30, but you might have a few, right? I have my corporate clients, my executive clients. I have my military clients. I have people who hire me for speaking. I have the media that I interact with. And I have some business associates who help me get my work done. And I have staff. They're all different audiences, but there's not 30 of them. So think about the people who have opportunities you want, right? Business associates, colleagues, peers, mentors, hiring managers, the people who have the opportunities you want for where you are right now. Then, what we have to understand is that with every target audience, each person has two sets of needs. First, we have what we call functional needs. And the functional needs are kind of like the check the box items, right? They're the ones I'm less excited about, but they're the ones that we have to have because if we're going to have a conversation, I need to know certain things, right? If I'm hiring an orthopedic surgeon, I need to know that you've done surgery, that you know about bones and orthopedic stuff, that you've got an active medical license. And, so there's certain things I need to check on a box before I'm willing to have that conversation. If I want a cup of coffee, I can go to Starbucks because they have coffee, right? That's functional requirements. They're sort of the things we need to know in order to move forward. Are you following along? What we really need to know, though, is what people need to feel. Because again, they're going to make a decision not just on what they know, right? I know Starbucks has coffee, but what do I need to feel? If I go to Starbucks, I'm going to feel a sense of community because they know my funny drink and they don't laugh when I order it, and I get self-esteem because I get this very fancy cup that shows I can pay $5 for a cup of coffee. So I get emotional gratification. That orthopedic surgeon who has the technical skills, if they make me feel like my questions aren't dumb, that I feel safe with them, that they're going to take care of me and my future looks better if I work with them, my emotional needs are met. Every human being you are interacting with, whether they're clients, hiring managers, peers, your staff, they need to feel things. And it's not just about giving the facts and just the facts. It's about making sure we connect as people. And I can tell you right now, with the world the way it is, that's probably more exaggerated than ever before. People need human connection. They need to know that they're safe and they're cared for and validated. And if you're leading a team of people or you've got, others around you, it's important that they feel something. So while we need to make sure we have functional needs met, we really need to pay attention to those emotional needs. And that's why branding is so critical. Here's another way to think about it. When you interact with your clients or hiring managers or your peers or whoever, what is the problem that they need solved? And how can you solve it? Think about that for just a moment. I know, for instance, my clients don't wake up in the morning and say, I really need to work on my personal brand. and they don't pick up the phone and call me, right? That's not what most people, that's not the language most people use. But they might say, why am I getting passed up for promotions? How come I can't get hired? I really don't know what I should do with my career that makes me feel fulfilled. I'm not getting paid what I'm worth, right? Those are personal branding problems, but they're not using the right language that I use. So my job is to understand their language. Think about the problems your target audience has, what language they're using, and make sure as you're communicating with them, even if it's on a daily basis, that you're solving those problems in the way you can. That's a quick way to get people's attention is talk about the problems I'm feeling and how you can solve them. Now I'm paying attention. So I mentioned the idea of feedback, and sometimes we don't know how well we're building rapport with our target audience. We don't know if our personal brand is landing flat or it's really taking off. And feedback is a way to get that. And we have to recognize that if we're going to send a survey or we're going to ask people, that what they give us back is their perception, and their perception is their reality. So let's say you were to take one of the suggestions I write about in my books, where you ask people to offer up 3 or 4 words they would use to describe you. If those words come back really different than you thought they would, you've now been given a lens into their reality. It isn't about getting argumentative or defensive. It's understanding that their reality might be super different from what you thought you were projecting. And there's an opportunity to fix that. But you're always going to take feedback in and ask yourself, do I need to act on this? Right. So if I got feedback after a program where people said, you were a little loud, you're kind of a big presence, I'm good with that. I'm really good with that. That's my personality. I don't mind. But if I got feedback that said, you didn't connect with your audience, you didn't seem appreciative, well, that I would really take note of, because that is my brand. That's really important to me. You can ignore some feedback. Again, you're not going to do it to the person who gave it to you, but it's important to understand that just because somebody gives you feedback doesn't mean you have to take it as gospel and go run with it. You get to make the decision. Remember, it's all about having control and choice. You get to decide with where you are today and where you want to go, which is that ideal state, desired brand, what's going to get you there. Because if you get feedback that shows you blind spots or weaknesses or opportunities, you have now been given a tremendous gift. And that's why feedback is so powerful. So personal branding starts with the values, understanding you have a current brand, you have a desired brand or an ideal end state. We have to pay attention to the target audience and what they need to know and what they need to feel. And feedback can be a way that we sort of understand our audience better and understand how far apart we are from where we want to be. And if all of this is making sense and you're tracking with me, then I have one request, and that is that you make an agreement with yourself that you'll stay the course. Because building a personal brand, while it's simple, it's not easy, and you will get tested. And bright and shiny objects will dance in front of you and try and tempt you off course. And it's really hard to stay committed to what you know and you believe is right for you. I'll give you an example that happened to me. It was about 2009, about a year into my business. I had been chugging along, getting clients, doing my work, and doing marketing and planting seeds and networking and all that. And I got an opportunity to interview for, and then actually found out I was going to be awarded the contract for a corporate branding project. It was a lot of money. In 2009, it was a lot of money. I knew I was going to get the award. They were just writing it up. My husband was so excited, went out, bought champagne, made dinner reservations, woohoo, all this money. Can't believe it. Brand new entrepreneur. And I thought about it and I thought about it. And I had to tell him that I was going to turn it down. And I have to say, when I told him, I've never seen color drain out of that man's face as fast as when I said that. But I told him I was going to turn it down. And he said, well, tell me why. And I said, well, here are 3 reasons I'm going to turn this down. And maybe these 3 reasons make no sense to you or you don't agree with them, but they made sense to me. First, the people I was interacting with at this company, they weren't really nice. Oops, sorry. They weren't really nice people. And that was important to me. They weren't nice people. They treated me like a vendor. I hated every meeting with them. They had been told to do this exercise from their board of directors and they didn't want to go through the motions. And so they kind of resented it and they resented me. And it was just nasty every time I was there. But I could do the work because I had done it many, many times before. So I didn't enjoy being around these people. That was the first reason. The second reason is, you know how people hang out with people that tend to be like them? Well, I knew I would do a good job. And if I did a good job, they'd probably want to refer me. And if they referred me, they would refer me to people they know who are probably going to be more people like them. And that didn't appeal to me. But the third reason was this was such a big project that I would have to literally turn down any other new work for at least 3 or 4 months. I didn't have bandwidth. I was a startup. I didn't have enough people to help support that. And I wasn't sure I was ready to turn down what could be other work that I would enjoy doing. And I turned the job down. And I remember the woman said to me, do you realize how bad the market is? And yeah, in that moment, I panicked. I think I probably threw up a little bit in my mouth, but I knew I had done the right thing. It just wasn't the easy thing. And this next part may sound a little far fetched, and I know it's going to sound like a stretch, but within days, my phone started ringing. The emails came in. People who had held on to my business card for months that were now ready to start working with me. And it was like all this opportunity was rewarding me for making that tough decision. I know that sounds like magic, but it's happened since many times. And I've heard from other people who've heard me tell that story who've said, that happened for me too. And it will happen for you if you stay true to what you know is valuable. If you don't compromise your values, if you don't compromise your integrity and what you're working towards, it does reward you. I just hope you remember my name and can send me that story because I love those emails. But that's the branding. And the branding is the heavy lifting. That's the hard part. What we're going to talk about now for the remainder of our time is the marketing. How does your brand show up in marketing, in self promotion? And yeah, we are talking about self promotion because to be the best kept secret doesn't work anymore. Nobody gets hired because they were a secret. We need to know where you are, who you are, what you stand for, and how you can add value. And if you're not making that known, you're leaving a lot of your power on the table. I'm going to present you with several tools that we use in personal branding and self marketing. You don't just get to pick the ones that are easiest. That's what everybody asks me. Can I just pick the one that feels safest? No, you have to use all of them and they have to work in concert because personal branding is never about being perfect, but it is about being consistent. So if you only focus on social media, for instance, and not on in person, then it falls apart because they don't match. So you might use them at different times, but you use them all. And through everything, it's about staying authentic. You know, there's one you, and that's the you that somebody is looking for, either to help them grow or build or create. And that's what we want to promote. We don't want to promote an alternate side of you or, you know, an alternate persona who's just going to disappoint. So it really is about being authentic and genuine. The first tool that we use is narrative. And narrative is language. It's storytelling. It's how we tell an event, right? And I think that's probably why I'm not in love with resumes because resumes aren't narrative. They're lists of successes and bullet points and numbers and metrics and responsibilities. But narrative is storytelling and it's so much more powerful. And narrative starts with you. It starts with self-talk. The words, the stories, the mantras, the messages you're telling yourself are critical. And more in the coaching I'm doing, not just because of the pandemic, but because of where we are in the world over the last 5 years, self talk has come up more and more because I'm finding that whether you're recently separated or you've been out for a while, that these tapes of doubt are coming back up. And if you're finding yourself feeding your psyche with negative self talk, it's really damaging because what you tell yourself influences what you tell other people. Nobody's that good at acting that you can hide it. And we can usually all tell when somebody's trying to convince us that they're really happy to be here if they don't feel it, or that they're really confident about something if they don't believe it. So, what you tell yourself influences what you tell other people, and that directly influences what other people tell other people. And really, the power comes from that pass along. We want people to be talking about us when we're not in the room. And we want that narrative to be consistent with the brand and the experience we're trying to create. So, narrative is the first step. And one of the things and one of the ways that we express narrative is when we first meet each other, right? In the old days, we would meet each other in person. But now we're probably meeting each other on a Zoom call or on a group chat or some other socially distanced experience. And your elevator pitch is how you introduce yourself. It's how you tell me a little bit about you. So I'll want to keep hearing more. And the first thing I suggest you do with an elevator pitch is tell me what you do. And if you use a really military heavy, jargon heavy explanation, I probably won't understand because I'm in the 95%, right? That isn't prior military. So I don't understand. So civilianize it, simplify it, because then my brain will calm down and I'll hear what comes next. And what comes next is, why do you do that work? How do you do it differently? How did you get into that kind of work? What is it you're looking for? This is where your brand really starts pushing through, because what you do is maybe, your title or an explanation of your field, but this is where it gets interesting. And if you still have a few minutes with someone, paint a picture, show me what that looks like, give me an example, tell me a story about the kind of work that you do. This is a great short and sweet 60, 90-second way of introducing yourself. One day, I hope it'll be in an elevator when we don't have masks on. But for right now, we're doing a lot of this on Zoom calls. A really good elevator pitch is exciting, right? You're talking about you, a subject you should know best than anybody. And if you're excited about your future, if you're passionate about your work, then you're going to be smiling. You're going to look at the person, and that excitement is going to come through. It's also concise and succinct. Imagine we were standing in an elevator and I asked you to introduce yourself and you started telling me your whole life story. Well, I am probably pushing every button on that elevator to get out because I didn't ask you that. I just said, what do you do? And finally, your favorite subject will always be you. My favorite subject, c'est moi. So if all we're doing is talking about you and what you're doing, what you're looking for, and where you came from, and you don't ask me anything about myself, well, then I didn't get to talk about my favorite subject. So make sure that your elevator pitch or elevator speech returns the favor and asks the other person to introduce themselves. Now, a bad elevator pitch does read your job description or resume. And boy, if it reads like a list of MOS, now I'm really turned off and I'm really tuned out because I don't understand what those acronyms and alphabets and all that jargon means, right? If I'm also prior military, then you can have that conversation as much as you want, but you might not know that when you first meet someone. And try not to be pushy. This isn't closing a deal. This isn't trying to get, an answer from somebody. This is just a way of introducing yourself. So remember, your narrative starts with you, what you tell yourself, and then what you tell other people, like in an elevator pitch, because you want that pass along value so that somebody can introduce you in the way that is most authentic and most meaningful. So a few years ago, I had an opportunity to speak at the Marine base at Quantico. Just amazing experience. They had 500 active duty Marines in my program, and they just were so attentive, and I was so impressed. And I was talking about personal branding, and then I got to talking about networking. And as I started to say the words, this one gentleman in the front row raised his hand and he said, "Ma'am, when you talk about networking, is that thing where we gotta get to know somebody, connect on LinkedIn, give them a business card, meet them for coffee?" And as he was asking the question, his face did this. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much networking. And he said, all right, you may continue. I understand that military networking very different than civilian networking, but it is how people get ahead. It is how business comes in the door. It's how people get to the top of the pile of resumes, right? Which has grown exponentially. It's how they get mentored and supported and coached by other professionals is all through networking. So, let's talk a little bit about this unpleasant thing called networking. It really is a relationship. I mean, I have people in my network that there's no business connection, but we help each other and they refer people to me and I refer information to them and we give and take because it's a relationship. It's a conscious relationship we have chosen. I have to be paying attention as much to what they need and what they're talking about as they need to with me. Because if I can't return something of value, whether it's gratitude or something else, I have to be able to know what they need or what they care about or what's going on with them. So when you're networking with someone, it's not just all about you and would you look at my LinkedIn profile? Would you read my resume? Can you introduce me to Bob? Can you It's always got to be back and forth, and we have to listen as much as we speak. And this last point is really important, that when you're networking, and one day we'll all be in person and we'll be doing it like the image on the screen, it's really important to remember that the people that you're networking with can often tell you and help you directly. So I'll give you an example. About 5 years ago, Wounded Warrior Project had me train some transitioning Army soldiers who were going into entrepreneurship, and they were all starting businesses. So I taught personal branding, and then we practiced networking, and then we were having some investors come in. And so I talked about this point, that people will tell you how they can help you. And I started talking to this one gentleman, and I noticed for some reason that he was standing underneath a clock. Took random note of that as he started telling me about this venture he was starting, kind of a farm to fork initiative. And he talked about how, he was looking for funding and it was environmental and ag rate related. But what I really paid attention to was the fact that for 8 minutes, this man didn't take a breath. He did not inhale, as far as I could tell, for 8 minutes. And after about the first couple minutes of him talking and telling me about his business model without stopping, I thought, how does the Army teach you to not inhale as you're talking? Like, how would they train you for that? Would they drop you into the ocean? Would they, make you crawl through the desert? Like, how? I'm so distracted by the fact that he has not inhaled for 8 minutes that when he finally did take a breath, I jumped in and I said, that's really a cool business model. I have a lot of clients who are venture capitalists and private equity guys who invest in sustainability projects. And he cut me off and went for another 11 minutes. Did anybody catch what just happened? He had a 19-minute spiel about his business, and he wasn't going to be diverted from that. And what I had jumped in and suggested is, I actually have clients who might be really interested in what he's talking about, but he couldn't pause to recognize that I had just dropped a golden egg in his lap. Networking is fluid. And civilians, we've been doing this networking thing while you were off fighting wars and doing things that are so much more important. So recognize that if we stop you mid sentence, or we suggest an alternative approach, or we have a suggestion for you, we might be seeing farther down the road than you are, because we've been doing this. We understand how this works. So think about networking as fluid, not rigid, because rigid can burn bridges. I didn't want to help that guy after that experience, but I thought, what a great story, right? So we're going to continue as people are joining. Your network will be in a position, if they're informed about you, to refer you, to endorse you, to give you information and insight and back channel guidance and support you. And now more than ever, we need our network. We need them yesterday, but we really need them for all this tomorrow. So we network online as well. And the fourth area that we look at, or the third area that we look at, is online, social media, digital capital, your online reputation. First and foremost, got to stay authentic. Really important that you're you online. It's about building those relationships, just like we would in person. When we connect online, we have to build relationships, and we have to be focused about how we're going to be online. It's not just about connecting with everybody and making friends and sharing whatever we want. Think about how you want your target audience to receive you, what you want them to perceive about you. What do they need to know, and what do they need to feel? That's the lens that your positioning online should come through. And remember, nothing you post online is ever private. There's no such thing as a private group. There's no such thing as a private forum or chat or DM, IM, anything, because anybody can take a screenshot. And it's a slippery slope today. So I just want to kind of quickly talk about LinkedIn, because it really is the biggest social networking platform for those of us in any way connected to business. And if you didn't know, or you hadn't taken advantage of this, LinkedIn gifts you, in gratitude for your military service, a year of premium membership. And, for some of you, you may have already used this. For some of you, you didn't know it was out there. But if you have served in the United States military, you get a year of premium membership. They've actually now figured out how to extend it to military spouses as well. So, active duty, veteran, military spouse, you get all these tools that come with the premium version of LinkedIn. The favorite service of mine is LinkedIn Learning. And if you haven't played in LinkedIn Learning, there is a treasure trove of information waiting for you. I have several courses on LinkedIn Learning, everything from transitioning from the military, how to build a personal brand, how to fix your reputation, how to have a conversation with your boss. So there's all this learning behind the firewall of LinkedIn Learning that comes with your premium. And wherever you are in your career, this is a great asset to learn from industry experts about various topics. So that's definitely one thing we want to be paying attention to. But as a profile, each of us gets a profile, whether we're on free or premium. And the first thing I see is your profile picture. So when you think about your brand, which profile picture is going to best represent who you are and how you want people to feel about you? I get that somebody wants to put a picture of them in uniform with big scary guns. 95% non-military. Keep remembering that number, because we don't know what that means, right? We also don't want to see pictures of people's spouse, children, pets, um, chest, or the back of their head. These are just weird profile pictures, and I'm so hopeful that one day, none of these people are ever in one of my classes. But if one of these is you, probably should be replaced. These are what profile pictures should look like, right? They're looking at the camera, they're presentable, they show you what the person looks like today. On the far right is Lieutenant Colonel Chris Ford, who I coached out of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the day he retired from the Air Force and left the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon, he switched his military uniform into a civilian picture on LinkedIn. Perfectly appropriate. Colonel Haddock in the middle still works very much in the military space. She was with General Pace as his, I think, assistant for years, and she still very much works with veterans. So completely appropriate to have pictures that show your patriotism. But if you've been out of uniform for 5 years and your profile picture still shows you in uniform, that's confusing to investors or hiring managers or even your internal managers. They don't understand why you'd still show yourself in uniform. Apologize, this looks a little blurry, at least on my end, but you also have this banner behind your profile picture, and that's where you can add even more interest to your profile. So if there's something about your kind of work or your career or the where you live that would be interesting and tell somebody more about you, be sure to switch that out. This happens to be mine, and obviously I run a business, so you can see how my profile background is spelled out that way. You also get a header underneath your name, and you can put your job title and where you work, or you can tell me something about you. So I encourage people to use more narrative, more descriptive language, even if it's a series of keywords, so that people can find you and learn a little bit about you by looking at your profile. My favorite part of LinkedIn is the About section because that's where you're unpacking something that's not going to be on your resume. You're telling me more about who you are. On mine, I say, I am obsessed with training executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals to be in control of how they appear to others. Because if language like that, when you look at my LinkedIn profile, if that turns you off, we shouldn't have a conversation because that's how I talk. So you're seeing more about who I am and what I care about in my About section, and make sure that you're mapping to the keywords that are important to your customers, your clients, your employer, or your target employer. And those are not always the keywords that are important to you. So you need to learn those. I also want to bring up a wonderful mentoring platform. This is actually how I met Chris, is on this platform called Veterati.com. It's a completely free platform where you can fill out a profile and connect to professionals like myself for free coaching. And Chris and I've talked many times. He's referred other people to me. And it's just a wonderful platform to, test an idea, get some, outside perspective, learn about somebody's industry or their career field or even the company they work for. So I just want to put a little plug out. It's completely free to you. It's completely free to me. And it's just a wonderful way for those of us civilians to say thank you to those of you who have served. So finally, the last two areas that we talk about with personal branding and how you market yourself is your image and your style, how you display your confidence, right? And yes, we're all focused right now on waist up, right? Because I don't know if you're wearing pants and you don't know if I am. But your confidence comes through in how you present yourself, how you make good eye contact. We're not wearing uniforms. So all I can tell is, do you respect me enough if we're on a Zoom call to dress for the occasion, right? A job interview you would dress up for. But for some reason, people have begun to believe that because we're all at home that you don't have to dress up and show respect. And I believe that image and body language show not only respect for the other person but self-respect as well. So if this is how you're greeting your Zoom calls, just pray that no fire alarm goes off, no kid runs into the room, because if you stand up, it's not going to necessarily show you in the best light. But that's a little levity for our program today. So we've covered a lot of grounds. I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers. This is where you start. Start with your values. Think about who you are. What do you believe in so fundamentally that if I took those values away from you, you wouldn't be you? Think about your current brand. Where are you starting from? What is the reputation you have right now with the people that interact with you, the people that are serving with you or have served with you, that work with you, that work for you? What do they think of you? What is the reputation? What are the brand assets, the words they would use to describe you? But remember, you get control when you map all of that to what you want, which is your desired legacy. It is the most incredible experience when you know every day what you're working towards in terms of the relationships, the impact, the influence, the people that you'll inspire. Think about those target audiences. What do they need and what do they need to feel? This is why you can't have 30 of them, but you may have 5 or 6, and they may need to feel very different things. Build a strategy for this part of your career. It is too important to leave this all to chance. And what's beautiful about all of this is you get to start living that legacy and enjoying all the rewards that come from it right now. If you do the work and you make that agreement with yourself, you will start enjoying the benefits. I put my contact information on the screen. I hope we find each other on Veterati, but I also want you to know that I'm here. And if you have questions, if there's something I can help you with, I will absolutely do my best. If you have a chance to pick up Success After Service, it really is that good of a book. And you'll get to hear more from Chris in the book and maybe some other names that you recognize that are part of your community, at least your military community for sure. But I do this work and I spend my time teaching this program to all of you because I am so grateful for your service to our nation. My mother was actually raised in communist Hungary. And she taught my brother and I at a very early age that freedom shouldn't be taken for granted and it doesn't come for free. So, this is my way of saying thank you for my freedom, my family's freedom, and for all you have done for our wonderful nation. And with that, I will turn it over and we'll get into some questions. And I'll stay as long as you all want me to. But I thank the team at Elite Meat and all of you for spending a Thursday evening with us. And let's see what questions we have. I'm going to turn the slide share off so I can see all of you. And everybody's muted but me. So I think you'll just have to take yourself off of mute if you have a question. Or Meg, did you want to administer that?
No, first of all, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. So much of what you said
Good.
really resonated with me in my personal experience, and I'm a civilian, so I don't even have that that confusion in terms of what are the right things to say. I've been in this space for a while, but very, very valid points in what you were saying in terms of how you speak to folks that are in that other 95%. So thank you for that. I think that I'd love to see if anyone has any questions in particular about the process or anything that they may be concerned about in terms of really, you know, opening up themselves to increasing their personal brand. Because I know there's some hesitation in the community. And so I think if anyone wants to talk about that, we can address that first.
Lida, I'll just open with also sharing thanks. And I've got a question of sorts, but probably a little elaboration, I think, on a point you started to make. In being a pretty decent participant on LinkedIn and having transitioned in about August and having kind of seen a little bit of both sides of this coin, one of the things that seems to me LinkedIn has some people evolving to sharing a lot more. To me, I'll just put a label on it of it's a little more Facebook-like than what I have understood, and I think I still kind of approach, and I think you're adhering or promoting in terms of focusing on your brand, focusing on things that are related for sharing relative to our professional pursuits. And I see some folks that are doing it from an entrepreneurial perspective and trying to help folks relate to what are they bringing as an entrepreneur on a personal scale, and I think that makes some sense. But I see folks starting to share in ways that I don't see well connected to a professional context. And just if you wanted to elaborate more on how do you see that environment evolving and et cetera. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Thank you. You know, I think you're right, because LinkedIn is a professional platform, right? It's anybody connected to business. We talk about professional business related topics, some social, some causes, but it's known to be a professional, different from Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and who knows what's happening with Twitter right now. But yeah, but LinkedIn had that sort of purity. I agree with you that in the last 8 months, maybe 9 months, I've seen more of the I'm needing help, I'm struggling, this has been really hard type stuff show up. The one thing about LinkedIn though, the group polices itself pretty well. So where I've seen like spam try to show up or people being overly salesy, you get the community that says, hey, this is not the place for it. But I think in the last 8, 9, maybe even a year, we're becoming a little bit more tolerant of people getting more personal. I think because of where everybody is. That may change and go back to the way it was once everybody kind of calms down and the masks come off and we all feel okay. But that would be my guess, is that people are being a little more tolerant because there's a lot of people struggling and we're missing human connection, we're missing interaction. I've often said that there are people who are going online and sharing all their demons, all their vulnerabilities to try to find help, and they should find help. But there's going to come a time when we're all back to some kind of normal, and that information is going to be out there. And in some cases, they might regret that it went out there. So is LinkedIn the place for it? Absolutely not. I mean, I would say maybe Facebook is more the place for it. And even then, I would still question whether you really want all of that out there. So if that's what you're referring to, I think there's a little more tolerance right now just because a lot of people are struggling.
No, thanks. I think that was a good insight and appreciate it.
Sure. But still keep it professional. Please, no bikini shots, no, party shots, none of that. That's not what LinkedIn is.
Hey, Lida, this is Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, just wanted to thank you. Thanks again for your time tonight,
Of
coming
course.
out and volunteering to help. I did have a question. So, you said earlier when you first started, volunteering and making that transition from, being the corporate branding strategist to assisting veterans. That must have been, just a really hard stage in life to make that switch and pull you out of your comfort zone. But it made me think about when you were talking about tying it all together and the self promotion piece. I think that's awkward, for a lot of veterans to do. And I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I see people that have been using LinkedIn for a while, and some people are really comfortable with writing those long messages and tagging organizations and people, and I just wanted your thoughts on self promotion and maybe a good example of how to break into that.
Well, and thank you for that. So, yeah, when I went from corporate into individual, I mean, I started with executives and they can brag just like I can. So there was no issue there. It's working with all of you that I learned that there was such a difference, right? And that's why I say this isn't to teach you how to brag, but if you're going to post something on LinkedIn, how do you tie it to a value proposition that advances you? So here's an example. A lot of folks will post other people's content, right? Maybe I wrote an article that you thought was great and you want to share that on LinkedIn. Instead of just posting, like this is something you found, add some comments to it, right? And say, I thought the author did a good job of pointing out these three things, but here's one place I disagree with. Because what your community, your connections start seeing isn't just the information you're sharing, which is an article, but they start learning more about you. And for hiring managers, recruiters, even employers, they want to know that if you say you're passionate about aerospace or defense or sustainability, that you post about those things, not just that you share other people's content or like content. I had a mentoring call the other day with a guy who said he's very active on LinkedIn. I said, you're really good with that like button because everything, and you could see somebody's active. All he did was like stuff. I'm like, what do you like about it? What are your thoughts about it? What struck you? So there's always that fine line between people who post way too much, or as Matt said, too much personal stuff, TMI, um, versus people who just put up a LinkedIn profile and don't share. And it's not just the updates, right? Because updates are one channel. You can write articles. And they don't have to be Pulitzer Prize winning articles. It could be 3 or 4 paragraphs about something that you're interested in, or something that you recently discovered, or a thought about something. It also in groups. So groups are wonderful in LinkedIn. There are military transition groups. There are special operations groups. There are groups around every segment of our population, and in those groups are people who are asking questions and answering questions. So that could even be a safer way. And I know that a lot of folks, especially if they're still active duty, they're trying to learn LinkedIn. I say just go into some Army National Guard groups, or whatever, Fort Carson group, so that you're with people you feel safe with, and you start seeing how the interaction works. um, and you'll know. I mean, if you start getting results and you start getting inquiries from people who are interested in your content, and you start seeing how that motion works, it kind of feeds on itself. And it can be time consuming, but it can also be incredibly rewarding, especially now when we can't drive across town and go have coffee with someone. Does that help answer the question, Jonathan?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I appreciate it. And I think,
Sure.
like you said, a lot of it will just be stepping out there, trial and error, seeing what works, and, hopefully seeing some good results. So I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Yeah, and we don't want to see a lot of error because those are the ones but trial and watch maybe is better, right? Watch what other people are doing. And yes, there are going to be some examples that are going to be too intimidating, right? And there are people who write long form posts with lots of tags. maybe that's the end goal, but you take baby steps towards that. Cool.
Hi, Lida. This is Nate.
Hi, Nate.
I had a question on the TEDx side. Tomorrow I'm supposed to pitch myself, and I'd love some pointers to pitch a TEDx event. And then, the messaging is kind of the hard part. I know that there's going to be some coaching within that, but the messaging is very, it's just really hard to come up with one. And then how would you take that messaging and turn it into a viable business model?
So first is, how do you pitch yourself for a TEDx? And then how do you take an idea and turn it into a business model?
Yep.
Okay. So how many hours do we have? No, I'm kidding. The TEDx one I'll do first. Because it is, there's nothing like standing in that red dot. Although I just did a talks at Google, which got so many more followers. It was all about military transition. So that is a great one to watch. I had no idea how many people watch that. So there's TED Talks and Google Talks. The TEDx's are not all the same. So I've had some clients go through the TEDx process where they were highly coached, highly rehearsed. Dress rehearsal on so much structure to them. Mine was like the opposite. Mine just, they knew who I was. They knew what I had done. They loved the military angle. I did mine at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. They loved the military angle, and the process of getting to do it wasn't hard. The process of doing it was hard. The idea with TED is you take one idea and unpack it. So it's not everything you know on the topic. If you watch and watch as many as you can, it's one idea. And if that idea gets unpacked in 10 minutes, it's a 10-minute one. We were capped at 12 minutes, so I knew I couldn't go over that. But if it was supposed to be 6 minutes, you should finish at 6 minutes. And what's tempting is people want to go 12 minutes because that's how long they have. But they're looking for something that's unique and different and compelling, because they're all supposed to be talks that the audience would learn something or be inspired or see the world differently. So depending on what the topic is, if it's too routine or not pedestrian, but if it's not interesting enough, there aren't going to be people who watch it and it doesn't go viral. So that's kind of what they're listening for. Hopefully you'll have one where there's a lot of coaching, because I think that does make them stronger. But you also get to have some say. I'll tell you really quickly, in mine, if you've seen it, or you're going to see it, right? You're all going to watch it, right? They put up a graffiti wall behind us, and they had told us they were going to do this. Well, I watched the people go ahead of me, and I knew that there were some panels that could switch out. My topic was my work with the military. And had I stepped out on stage with what they had up there, the F word would have been right over my shoulder. Not that it probably would have scared anybody from the military, but it wasn't the level of respect I wanted to show. And I insisted they switch that panel out. They weren't happy about it, but that was my argument. They also wanted us to all come in jeans and jackets. And I said, no, once again, I'm speaking to an audience I have so much respect for. I want to dress professional to show respect. So there are some places you can actually push back, but depending on how structured that is. Now, how do you take an idea and build a business around it? That's the American dream, right? There are tons of programs. IVMF out of Syracuse University has an amazing entrepreneur boot camp. Bunker Labs does all this work with entrepreneurs. There are online resources. Everything from ideation to funding to next level funding to IPO, right?
My question would be focused more towards the interest from your talk. How did you turn that into business revenue?
Oh, well, that wasn't my goal. My goal wasn't, I don't make money off of the work I do with the military. Now, if a corporation hires me to come in and talk about veteran issues, the corporation pays me. Unfortunately, if one of you wants my book, it costs money, but that's not my business model. My business model is working with corporate executives and professionals. That's where I make my living. This is my give back. This is my thank you. The TEDx and my first book actually did bring the interest from employers, which was not my plan at all, who said, hey, can we hire you to come in and teach us how to hire veterans? Or can we hire you to come and speak to the veterans who work for us? That became a business model, but that was never my plan. So
thank you very much.
This works that way. Thanks.
Hi, Lida.
Hi.
One of the things that I heard a lot in my own transition and still kind of hear is you start out with the canned question of what do you want to do next?
Right.
And what the first thing a military person does is they list you a whole bunch of things that they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I realized, to be quite honest, it was kind of towards the tail end of my transition, is when we do that, we as a community do that, we're really not answering the question of what do we want to do. And so when you recognize that in casual conversation, how do you tie in what you've just kind of presented us, which is more about figuring out your values, matching your action to your values in order to have credibility? How do you map that process to the process of changing the conversation from can you do to what do you want to do, and have that roll into a more, I guess, comprehensive
Sure.
professional identity?
Well, and Mac, I love that because I actually talk a lot about that in Success After Service. So I'll put you on commission. But the idea behind your question is, I preach this all the time. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you want to, and just because you want to do something doesn't mean you can. I mean, I'm 6'1". I might want to be a jockey and ride in the Kentucky Derby. It ain't happening, right? No force wants to get near me. But so just because I want to do it doesn't mean I can. And just because I can do it doesn't mean I want. And many of you are going to struggle with that because the skills and the abilities you developed in the military are not feasible, right? I've coached a lot of, Green Berets and snipers and SEALs who've said, yeah, there's not a lot of demand for snipers in the corporate world, right? It's a good thing. But it's so how do you take the skills forward, and how do you figure out what that career path looks like? So personal brand is certainly part of it, but your career plan has to map out with that. And figuring out who you are is a great first step, because some of the things you might want to do, you're not positioned for. And that could be the only hurdle. It's just that maybe you don't have the network that it would take to get the kind of funding that you want for your business, or maybe you don't have the education in your back pocket that would help you get the credibility and the name recognition that you need to be able to do that kind of work. So understanding that it starts with you means you also get to think about what you want to do with this time. I love that whenever I speak to somebody coming out of the military, they all say, we don't want charity, we don't want a handout, but we do want to do work that's meaningful. Well, what does that look like for you? Who do you want to be spending your day with? How do you want to be impacting them and inspiring them and influencing them? What does that look like? And then do you have the tools and the credentials to get there? Because your brand is part of it, but it's not the whole answer. If what you want to do is something that is different from what you've done before. Is that getting closer to your?
Yeah, I guess I think I found what it was for me, and I think I'm in a good position now. I'll say I think I'm in a good position, but I've only been there since June, so
well, that's good.
We're still trying to figure things out a little bit, but it's really one of those things that I've heard a lot, continue to hear a lot, and it's a point, and that does not equal want conversation is something that I tend to have with more of the folks that are my shipmates that are coming and coming across the fence after me, kind of thing. And I just, it was a different, your take on the values, action, credibility was a different perspective than I've heard. And I was trying to tie
Mesh them together. Yeah. Well, and I just think it's helpful to know that, just because you're trained one way or you're trained to do one thing, you still have the opportunity to reinvent, to pivot, to re-engineer what comes next. It might require some schooling. It might require some some networking and, and getting up to speed. But that's what a lot of people have done this last year. Upskilling, reskilling has been the focus for the last year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good. I hope you're warming up there. I know you said your room was cold.
It is. It's
Okay.
still cold.
Cool. Thanks, Mac.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
Hi, Lida.
Hi.
So, yeah, I had a question for you. So
Hi.
when you talked about the, values plus action equals credibility, and you talked a little bit about, changing your career and having to start building the actions to get yourself that credibility. That part resonated a lot with me because obviously I'm changing, right? I'm coming from a field where I'm very well known. I have a good reputation among the people I work with. Do you have any tips on how to transfer that or not, maybe not transfer, but build it as quick as possible?
Well, so that's really more of like a reputation pivot, right? So you're coming from one, and military transition doesn't typically fall into the pivot, but you're coming from one career into another, and you want to take forward the reputation assets that are valuable and discard the ones that are no longer going to serve you. Are you going to continue to work in a way that's connected to military, or are you completely stepping away?
Yeah, I am going to be a little bit connected to military, but so I mean, I guess I could tell you I'm going to be a loan officer, but I'm going
Oh,
to do veterans loans is going to be my
nice.
specialty. So
Nice.
I will have that connection. There
Good.
will be some credibility there, but also I have to go to other people that are not in the military, agents and whatnot, like, hey, I can
Right.
definitely do this for you, even though I've never done it before.
Well,
So
and
that's kind of where I'm asking how, how do I get
sure.
that?
Well, I think looking at those buckets we talked about, right? Narrative, networking, digital, social media, body language, image, all of that. Some of the connections from the military are probably going to serve you going forward. So you're going to want to keep those. It's kind of inventorying what you're starting with. What is your narrative? Maybe your elevator pitch is going to shift, and your the way that you explain who you are and what you do is going to start moving out of purely military into serving the military, prior military community. Your online connections, if you look at the connections that you have now, are most of them people in uniform that you served with? Maybe starting to broaden that out and look at where some of those people are in their civilian careers. So it's using those same buckets, but knowing that you're bringing forward what's valuable from your past. You understand the environment, you understand the culture, the language, everything from the military, but bridging that to show that you also understand the loan business, the financial sector, and being seen as an expert in that as well. um, it's interesting. I mean, transition like that, pivoting like that, is always fascinating. I've worked with a lot of people who go from being doctors to being teachers, or engineers to being authors, and there's always that. You don't want to lose what's working for you, but you have to build on it to attract that new audience. And I would say for you, Justin, I would certainly be doing some of that feedback, asking these people that you're currently serving, what are the attributes that really come to mind when they think of you? How would they assign your value? Those would be some good questions to ask to make sure you don't get rid of something or devalue something that's actually, a big part of your brand. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, it does. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of looking through it and finding the best parts, and then
Yeah.
figuring out which parts I don't need, which parts I do need.
Well, exactly, because there's some of it that's not going to be relevant anymore. I mean, the day to day of what you're doing in the military isn't relevant in what you're doing
Sure.
next, but being able to keep those conversations. And there's a lot of fluidity to this. So if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, let's jump on Veterati, and I'm happy to talk more specific about your situation.
Okay.
But that's that off the top of my head, those would be some of my thoughts.
All right, great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
But I just want to bring up one thing from the civilian side, right?
Sure.
So I'm kind of doing the opposite. I was in corporate for 20 years, and then I had a bunch of corporate clients. My brother, who's an Army veteran, asked me to help out with some marketing initiatives for a veteran nonprofit. Loved the work I was doing. Decided to pivot my business, go solely into supporting veteran nonprofits. And then obviously I came on board with Elite Meat, but I am doing the opposite, right? I've been working in the veteran space for 5 years in the soft community. So I'm doing the same. I'm learning the language. I'm learning all the branches. I'm learning all the roles. I'm learning all the experiences, which is a lot. It's a lot, especially when you have all different branches. So I'm doing the opposite, right? And I have to prove myself in the soft community, in the veteran community. So I am doing kind of the reverse. One of the things that I struggle with is I'm not solid with my personal branding. And Gary, you will totally call me out. And Luke, I know will call me out on this. But like, I do not like to put myself out there. But I realize as a professional and as a marketer that I have to do that. Now, I will go like, on board for any one of my clients, any one of the nonprofits, any one of you guys in our membership. I will say anything. I have the loudest mouth out there. But when it comes to talking about my skills and experience, I'm just not comfortable with it. So being uncomfortable with sharing your personal brand is not just specific to the veteran community.
Right. 100%.
The other side are very uncomfortable doing that. So, I just want you to know that it's not just this group of individuals. A lot of people are experiencing it and based on whatever capacity that they're in. So,
well, and I would love to add on to that. A lot of people hearing you say that would then follow up and think, oh, it's a woman thing, right? Or it's a female thing. Most of my clients are men, and they're the ones struggling with it. And they're executives, they're senior professionals, they're running global companies. They don't know how to do it. So I don't think it's specific. It's certainly not specific to military. I just think culturally, when we look at one culture that has such unique standards and traits and values, but the military recruits from the same job pool that civilians do. You all were civilians before you became, you joined the military. So there's this, it's almost a disconnect, right? But it's culturally so different. But I would say for you, Meg, that it is about telling who you are. And this community, I mean, you'll see the longer you work with them, they will be skeptical at first, but when they see your heart's in the right place. I mean, I have never gotten support like I have from the military community. When my first book came out, I reached out to a few folks and said, can you help me get the word out? I mean, they were like, we are on this. And I had the best marketing force. I couldn't have paid for it. I mean, I was getting pictures of the book in different parts of the world. People had sent it. It was unreal. Once they know that your heart's in the right place, because there are some people who will take advantage. I mean, that exists. But you're with good company.
Yes, and I agree. And that's why I feel confident talking to any one of our corporate partners that they are truly going to land a rock star if they're pulling from the Elite Meat community. Because I have never, in all of my years working in the corporate space, have worked with such great individuals.
Yep.
And so I feel very confident knowing that they're going to get a great connection through Elite Meat.
Definitely.
So, but yeah, you guys, I think this has been a fantastic event. I mean, there's been some solid questions. I think that's been some good conversation, a lot of things for people to go work on, me included in that. And certainly I'm looking forward to seeing how everyone evolves and how everyone really, takes control of their personal brand and brings it to the next level as they go through their transition journey.
Me as well.
Anyone else have any other questions? No? Well, I truly thank you so much for your time, Lida.
Of course. My pleasure. Thank you to all of you. It is just an honor to be with you, and I'm always here if you've got a question or like in Justin's case, if you want to unpack that further one-on-one, let's do it. Let's get into it. Any way I can help and show my appreciation for your service to our nation.
That would be my question is how do we schedule a one-on-one with you?
So the link that I showed, Veterati, it's veterati.com. And Meg, maybe you can send it out. It's a free mentoring platform, and I put hours on there every month. and you just book a time with me and the system connects us and we talk. It's that easy. And if you need something outside of that, just let me know because I'll make time. But that's the easiest way. Because then you have access to all sorts of other mentors as well. Just people like me who are volunteering our time to help you in any way that we can.
Thank you.
Sure.
So we'll make sure to send that link out to everybody.
Great. Terrific.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Well, everybody stay safe and healthy and keep washing your hands and wearing masks, I guess.
We look forward to seeing you at an in-person event, hopefully soon.
I would love that. Good night, everyone.